All right, I'd like to call to order the SL4B Corporation on Tuesday, April 2nd at 4 p.m.
The Tuesday of second meeting of Sugarland Development Corporation is called to order.
Are there any public comments
No, sir.
today? Okay. Then we'll turn it right over to the workshop. Start. Thanks.
All right, so good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our joint board meeting. We're happy to be here today as we'll have a discussion on Sugar Land's market, dealing with real estate development, tourism, and current economic development initiatives. So for our audience, my name is Alva Johnson. I'm from our economic development and tourism team. Our moderator today for the panel will be Jessica Hubble from our community development and planning team, redevelopment team. I want to introduce our panelists today. I'll start with Mr. George Franz. With 23 years at Houston First Corporation, he heads the Tourism and Industry Relations Department, driving travel and trade for Houston. He manages key initiatives like Houston Marketplace and Houston Insider, and oversees the Houston Film Commission. Actively engaged in tourism, he chairs TTA, serves on Expedia's Media Solutions Select Board, and holds positions on boards like the Texas Association of Convention and Visitor Bureaus. Formerly president of the Greater Houston Convention and Visitors Bureau, he transformed it into the Houston Hospitality Alliance. Originally from Santiago, Chile, Mr. Franz represents Houston globally and resides here with his wife Holly and son Ethan. Second, we have Clayton Garrett, partner at Meristem Communities. He's a founding partner at this Meristem Communities, leads the Houston-based real estate development firm committed to creating sustainable, human-centric projects. With a focus on adding value to his team, community, and company mission, he embraces a philosophy of curiosity and generosity. Prior to Meristem, Mr. Garrett co-founded Agminity, specializing in agricultural amenities within master planned communities. Engaged in community organizations like the Urban Land Institute and the Houston Zen Center, he holds a law doctorate from St. Mary's University and a Bachelor of Arts from the University of Texas. Then Mr. Michael Garcia, CEO of Houston Methodist Hospital in Sugar Land, boasts over 20 years of hospital operational leadership experience, advancing from a nurse to his current position. Formerly Senior VP and COO and Business Practice Officer, Mr. Garcia spearheaded various hospital service lines, prioritizing exceptional quality, safety, service, and innovation. Holding a Juris Doctor from the University of Illinois and a Bachelor of Science in Nursing from Monmouth University, he previously served as System VP for Ascension Health Seton Healthcare, leveraging his clinical expertise to aid in the development of new medical centers. And finally, our final panelist is Mr. Tom Thompson. He is managing partner at Reeves. In 2023, after 15 years at Limestone Investments as COO and head of portfolio management, and at Limestone, he managed investor relationships, oversaw a $10 billion portfolio, and served on the investment committee. Prior to that, he spent time at PricewaterhouseCoopers and the University of Texas, where he earned his BBA and MBA with specializations in real estate finance and private equity. Before we begin, I do want to extend a special thank you to our panelists for being here today and making time to join us. Now, to kick off our discussion, I'll turn it over to
Welcome, everybody. As Alba said, Alba and I used to present a market update and just kind of go over the stats, but we wanted to bring a more dynamic presentation at this year and actually bring in stakeholders from the industry to have, just a more open and back and forth conversation. So we're going to go through some questions, and then there will be some time at the end for Q&A. And then they'll also be around after the meeting in case you want to have any more conversations then. So we're going to go ahead and kick this off with Tom. And again, Tom is with Reeves here in Town Square. So what strategies are being employed to repurpose or adapt existing office spaces to align with evolving needs of tenants, specifically in the context of hybrid work models and collaborative work environments? And just make sure your light is green.
Okay, we're green. So let's go. First off, thanks for having me. It's good to be here with everybody. That's a big question, to be honest. It's one that everybody's thinking about, not just here in Sugar Land, but all across the country, all across the world. I think everyone knows, just with the pandemic of 2020, the world has changed, right? People went through a time period where maybe everyone's duration might have been a little bit different, but everyone locked up, habits changed, people's way that they lead their lives changed, the way that people did work changed very quickly. And so the end result of that is that, there's too much space, right? We have more office generally than we probably need going forward. And so what do you do about that? Well, it needs to start serving a different purpose, right? And if, people who own office or collaborate with office, if they're just thinking of it as, I'm leasing out space like I used to, then, because there's too much of it, you're just going to have to, kind of die a slow death, right? You're competing on cost and you're becoming, every day a little bit more of a commodity. And so, our view from the perspective of Reeves is we got to do something different. It has to change its purpose. You actually have to start thinking of it differently. And our company comes at it from, our background is in food and beverage and hospitality. And every day we think that office needs to become more and more like that, right? The idea of instead of historically the business worked on, leasing 4 walls and a couple of windows on a, 3, 5, 7 or 10-year type of basis to something that has to earn that business every day. Right. And have more of that hospitality orientation to it. It has to become something that not only has different sets of amenities, but it needs to actually be office owners need to think of it as, you're actually working on enhancing the experience for the office user. You have to be something that helps facilitate an office's company, like a tenant's culture. Right. And that's a very different mandate than the idea of just leasing office space. And so we're very focused on doing that. And I think it's not only is not every office building going to be able to make that transition, right? Being part of a mixed use project like here at Sugar Land Town Square helps a lot, right? Because people's lives, they got used to living at home where kind of their professional lives and their personal lives like interspersed and kind of became one. And it was very easy for them to get a quick snack or get a quick bit of exercise by going for a walk or going to their house gym or whatnot. And so everything blended together like never before. And now when people are being asked to go back to the office, if it doesn't enable them that opportunity to kind of live their lives seamlessly and provide that level of amenities or provide that level of services that enable them to kind of merge the two and actually do it efficiently, then you haven't earned back that commute. Right. And that's kind of one of the biggest challenges is everybody got that time and they used it in different ways. They spent more time with their families. They spent more time on, whether it be personal things. And so the office has to kind of evolve and meet those needs in a different set of ways. And again, it's getting the right amenities in place that enable them to have that proximity or those benefits and those kind of perks, but also blending them seamlessly through services and enhancing that experience.
And to the other panelists, feel free to jump in whenever you'd like. We're going to kick it over to healthcare. So Houston Methodist is, just our neighbor here. So Michael, how is Houston Methodist adapting its workforce development strategies to ensure that the staff members are equipped with necessary skills and training for the emerging trends in the healthcare industry?
See, that's a great question. And before I answer, I just want to thank everyone for allowing us to participate on this panel. One of the things I want to talk about in healthcare is everyone thinks healthcare and you think doctors, nurses, respiratory therapists, but healthcare is so much larger than that. You have so many aspects of healthcare that you don't realize. You talk about supply chain, IT, you think about business development. Those are all services that are actually going remotely. And when you're talking about how to train them properly for the future, I think Tom mentioned something that hit me. He goes, you haven't earned the right to that commute back because the non-clinical services that I'm talking about, those are the people that are fully capable and trained from the time that they graduate college to be working from home. Those are the individuals that they have the training, they have the resources, and they can work from home. But if you were to focus then specifically on the hospital, this is where all of us take a deep breath for a moment and go, during COVID, for all the nurses and doctors that were training and they weren't allowed in the hospital, is that the doctor or nurse you want? How did they train? And I think you take a pause because you look at it and go, are they ready? But one of the things I'll talk about is even my experience in training as a nurse. You look at the mannequins 20 years ago, it was a mannequin, they moved, do a whole lot except lay there and you practice skills, how to start IVs, how to insert Foley's, how to do chest compressions. You look at the training mannequins now, they sweat, they have heartbeats, they have, you can do chest compressions, that the mannequins can deliver babies. It is fascinating when you watch that. That appropriately allows us to train the healthcare providers in the future. The trick, though, in training the healthcare providers is actually keeping them there. And so when you're looking at how to keep all the healthcare providers, the doctors, the nurses, the medical assistants, respiratory therapists, you have to create a work environment that they want to work in. And I think far too often in healthcare, we struggle to evolve. We are not the gig work environment that you can work 4 hours, do something else, come back for 4 hours. That is not good for a continuity of care. So nurses and doctors will traditionally work 12 hours, 3 to 4 days a week. Those are long backbreaking hours. So how do you provide a very nice work environment for them? On our campus, there are 3 different stations that serve coffee. They proudly serve Starbucks. You have a wonderful kitchen that provides a lot of food, and yet they're still looking at all the amenities. How do you provide a gym? How do you provide other options for them that they can walk to? And one of the benefits of Houston Methodist Sugar Land being a very good neighbor to town center is that it's so close. And our employees want to live in the community they work in, and I think that's a benefit. So when it goes back to training, we train them well, but we have to keep them in the community. So then that way it ensures that we all have exceptional care by the very best providers.
Yeah, and we talked a little further, something that I think we don't think about is the families there getting, visiting people, getting taken care of at a hospital. Sometimes, in a bad situation, like being close to a place like this gives them a little bit of escape, right? They can walk and go get food and take a lap and take a breather. So there's benefits of us all kind of working together for that greater good. Okay, so kicking over to tourism. So Houston, as we know, is a both leisure and corporate destination. So what would you say is Sugar Land's niche market when it comes to tourism?
So, I would say that first of all, I would like to thank everybody for having me here. I will say, it might surprise you to know that last year Houston welcomed 53 million visitors into our city. All right. Now you can take those visitors. I mean, according to the rules, the way it's written, 53 million is all of those travelers that come in from at least 70 miles outside of the city, right? So if you take just the ones that stay overnight, right, which are the ones we're interested in, we're talking about almost 26 million visitors into our city, right? Those visitors generate an enormous amount of economic impact when they come into our city. And it's important that we bring them in because the way I like to put it is these are people that come in, spend a whole lot of money and then leave, right? And so and the key to that is to understand where your strengths are. And to the question, I think that Sugar Land has done a wonderful job in creating a family-friendly place that people can visit. Right now, I think it's done wonderful in attracting conferences into the Marriott. You've got a lot of limited service properties. But the truth is you can be whatever you decide to be, right? I mean, in Houston, we have the George R. Brown Convention Center. We have very proactively decided that we're going to seek out large association business to come and meet in our city, whether that be national association business or international association business, which means we have to bid against cities like Beijing or perhaps like Moscow or Buenos Aires, Argentina. And so we have to be prepared to compete against some folks that have a lot of attractive factors, right? In the case of Sugar Land, and I'm proud to say, I don't know how many of you know this, but Sugar Land is a part of a partnership that we call Around Houston, where we have official partnerships with 15 cities around Houston, where we proactively promote the whole region as a great place to visit. Because and it's the only one that exists in Texas and one of only about 5 in the country that exists like this. And it was my strong belief that we could really help to promote this region better if we work together. If you think about it, if I can work with, for example, Conroe to sell lakes and experiences like that, Galveston to sell beach experiences, on the top of the fact that I can also sell amazing museums and theaters and the fastest growing culinary scene in the United States, that really helps us to be more competitive. So it's hard for me to answer that question because I genuinely think it's just a matter of making a decision, right? What is it that you want to do? And then building the infrastructure that you need in order to bring it. And I do have to separate that into two, right? Because in Houston, we are receiving leisure visitors. right? But in order to bring leisure visitors, you got to have fun stuff to do, right? It can't just be all business, right? And that's one of the reasons that you're seeing us in downtown Houston. You may have seen recently that we were able to attain almost 2 billion in funding to redo the convention center and to rethink the way downtown is. Because we need a downtown that is vibrant. We need a downtown that people want to come to spend time in and that our visitors will have fun at, right? And when even our business visitors, because guess what? Think about it. When you travel, at the end of the conference, everybody wants to go out and eat. They want to go to a bar. They want to go have fun, right? And so it's important that we continue to have that perspective in mind.
Yeah, and you touched on the good point about sales tax, because that's how both of these corporations are funded, right? So we love our residents and we want to make sure that they have a great place to live and experience, but those visitors that come in for a few hours, our residents reap the benefit of the money that they spend here, right? It all goes back to them. And so tourism is a big piece of what economic development does and focuses on because of that. It's something we
And I'll say, just to give you an idea, I mean, the average spend of a visitor that stays 3 days at a conference in Houston is slightly over $1,000. Right? And you're talking about hotel, Ubers, restaurants, possible museum visits, shopping, all of that counts and it generates sales tax. And that sales tax at the end of the day helps to offset the cost that your locals pay, right? So that's the reason that almost every city in the world has a tourism office. It's to bring that outside impact into our cities.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Okay, so Clayton. So given Meristem's focus on resiliency and human-centric design, are these types of developments currently trending with developers and property owners? And then how do you ensure these developments remain relevant and resilient in these changing markets?
Yeah, so just a little bit of framework. So Meristem has designed Indigo community right outside the ETJ of Sugar Land, 660 home master plan with a farm and commercial center around it. So I wish we were in the city's ETJ. I actually am a resident of Sugar Land. So and when I was thinking about this conversation with you all and thinking about like when I made my choice to move to Sugar Land, what were those things that were interesting and attracted to me? I think obviously schools are kind of number one for people moving out here. Cost of living was a big factor for us, a lower cost of living than an in-town experience. For me, it was being close to our large parcel, so I could commute, kind of reverse commute, right? And when I think about today, so I purchased my home in 2017. When I think about today, I think some of the economics have shifted, right? For people, there's a significant work from home that many of us have talked about. When we're planning our master plan, we looked at the work for home factors, and it is one of the more significant reasons why people will move out here now. So it's trending above schools and other things. I also, Houston and Sugar Land and our MSA is becoming unaffordable. So I don't know if that's a sort of a factor that people are really understanding. But when you look at the price per square foot and the cost of living, there used to be a drive to qualify. Now that's happening another 20 miles out from kind of where we are. It's also, we have a lock-in mortgage effect happening, right? Where the 85% or something like that, don't quote me, but a significant percentage are people that have mortgages under 4%. So people are staying put. So when new people are trying to look at, Sugar Land as a place to relocate, you have somewhat limited housing stock from the supply side. You have higher than sort of what was typically experienced. We've got amazing schools. So when I think about resiliency and sort of the question about human-centered design, it's everything that we're talking about collectively. It's interconnected. So how far we have to commute, our livability and our ability to recreate in the place that we live. The surprising thing for me is that there's a way that people want to interact. So like when we're telling Indigo's story, for instance, people are really resonating, younger people specifically, with the story around a place, an identity, right? How they're interacting with the space, ability to walk places, ability to connect with community. It's all things that we've talked about, that when I looked at Sugar Land, that was something that I wanted. And I think as we kind of move through a process, our process, but also like what's happening in the adjacency, I think the identity of a place and how we can connect residences to commercial spaces, to schools and everything else is really impactful. So I think the structure of the place and the way we've are able to interact is something that we should pay like deep attention to.
Can I layer onto that?
Yeah.
Because I 100% agree, right? Like it's back to the first point I made, like the world has too much space, right? Like, so the standard on choice, like the execution to get somebody to come choose to be part of something has never been higher, right? Like, so the placemaking element is essential, right? Like the community, being able to create community is the glue, right? Like, but the standard of creating a place that's compelling from a design standpoint that people then choose to become part of and want to share in and spend their time in, right? Because we can do everything virtually, essentially, right? We can work virtually, we can shop virtually. So if you're going to come to a place like Sugar Land Town Square, that's near and dear to a lot of our hearts, like you have to have that higher standard of creating something of interest, something of that you can't get, virtually, right? And so a lot of that is the human experience. A lot of that comes with design. It makes you feel good. Or there's an experience or an event or some level of restaurant that you can get going and dining and being part of that dine-in experience versus getting it via delivery, which is also, it's very easy, is a choice, right? And so the experience that has to infiltrate everything, and that comes in a lot of different ways, but it's essential because, in everything we do, we have more power of choice as an end user, whether it's an office tenant or a resident in a community or, a retail patron, whether you choose to shop or whether you're going to do it in person. And so all these things that, that are words that we all use, but like standards is really critical and really important. And so we focus a lot of time just on that.
So in talking about the needs of the community, how does that look in the healthcare side? So Sugar Land, Fort Bend County is one of the most diverse counties in the United States. The expectations post-COVID, and then what they were speaking of what the community is expecting. What do you guys do, Michael, on the healthcare side to make sure you're meeting the community's needs?
So when you look at the needs of the community, when we were all growing up, you think of hospitals as one-stop shopping. You go there for a doctor's visit, you go there for a test, you go there for surgery. Hopefully you never need it, but it's there. When you look at how we design places now, when I hear Clayton talk about Indigo, we want to partner with him and go, how do you have a primary care clinic right outside Indigo where it's convenient? No one in our experiences wants to now drive to large complexes that are incredibly difficult to navigate. They want to go to a place that's convenient, easy, and they can get all their services. And if they need a higher level of care, they can go to a hospital. And the way we also design it is how to make it easy for the multi-generational visitors that will go and seek their healthcare needs. If you are 65 and you have a wheelchair or a walker, you won't want to walk 1,000 feet from the parking lot all the way to the reception desk. If you can just walk straight from a parking lot straight into the reception desk that is 50 feet away. That's how we think of healthcare now. In addition, we want to make sure that healthcare is in the community versus consolidated in a hospital, because then we can help facilitate that care, and we want to make it friendly for our consumers and the residents that live in the community. The last point I'll make is that hospitals shouldn't grow. They need to actually shrink. The goal is to keep our community healthy. The goal is to make sure we keep you out of the hospital and not spend all the money in your last 2 years because you were avoiding healthcare. We're promoting wellness in every specialty. And then we're also providing all those diagnostic treatments in the community. And that's what's going to help us help the community stay strong, stay healthy, and then it will have a significant impact on all the things that we do and how we can effectively use the space.
Awesome, thank you for that. So switching gears, talking about mixed use development. So 2 of our properties that are under or considered for redevelopment right now, the Imperial side, Lake Point. How does tourism play an impact in mixed use developments? We know there has to be retail, office, versus a hotel potentially, but how does tourism play a role there?
Oh, I come back to the same thing. I think it's the things to do, right? I mean, as you looked at mixed use development, you've got to look at things that are or activities that are going to keep visitors entertained. at the same time that you're creating spaces for your locals to have fun. And then, of course, listening to the conversation here, increasingly locals that want to have everything in one place, right? That means that it has to be more than just one restaurant that might be a local. Perhaps it's a big name restaurant. Perhaps it's a well-known chef. I'll tell you, I mean, the Woodlands, for example, has done a fantastic job in attracting some serious name talent that has gotten international attention into their mixed-use developments, right? And I think that's smart, right? And that tends to keep folks around quite a bit. And I think it's an important part of what you have to do. In terms of the overall mixed use development side, in terms of the larger picture, I do believe that you have to be focused on being mindful of the things around you. If you look at what we've done downtown, you've got the Astros, right? You've got the convention center, you've got Toyota Center, you've got a soccer stadium. And then you've got a big park, right? And in Discovery Green. And all that has helped to attract more conventions because we have 2,200 hotel rooms attached to the convention center, which allows us to draw big association and corporate business, and then 7,000 rooms within walking distance of the convention center. So imagine that 9,000 rooms within walking distance of the convention center. That's enormous. And that's what your meeting planner wants, right? But then when you look at it, restaurants and so forth, since the pandemic, a lot of them have closed. We don't have a strong entertainment district close to it, which works against us. If you've been to San Diego or if you've been to other cities that have enormous entertainment districts right around the corner from their convention districts, that also inhibits our partners from being able to conduct special events for sponsors and that type of thing. When an association of the American Heart Association decides to meet in Houston one day, we want them to all be able to come down, and not only because we want them to entertain themselves, we also want their big name sponsors to be able to hold large parties, to be able to hold events that they may want to. They maybe want to bring in special talent to come in the evening, and you have to have the space to do all those things, right? So depending on the markets that you decide to go to, whether that be sporting events, right? That's an area that I think that is ideal already, or whether you decide you want to go into bringing small corporate business or incentive business into the city. All that needs to be factored into the thinking of how you expand and how you grow your mixed use development.
So switching gears to retail, Tom. So what strategies are retailers employing to adapt to the changing consumer demands and market conditions in Sugar Land?
Yeah, so I think with retailers, again, it's a different variation of the same theme, but retailers, if you see where they have the ability, there's so much business done through e-commerce today that retailers, if they're doing a brick and mortar location, are choosing to do it in a way that only strengthens their brand, right? It's a way that they communicate with the customer, right? And so it's not just simply about kind of making a transaction or having sales, but has to be something that they think about that it enhances the brand of their business, right? And so that again manifests itself in a lot of different ways. Like here at Town Square, over the years, we've been able to work with the city to start creating flexibility in not only the associations that govern Town Square, but to change storefronts, right? And historically, when Town Square was built, again, the market valued kind of the homogeneity of things being the same. Today, that's kind of the opposite, right? The retailers are, if they can't communicate who they are through their brand, or that's kind of like their storefront expression, then they're not interested, right? And so that's like, I think, one of the real big trends, and the city deserves a lot of credit in thinking about, some of the things that you are doing in progressive, like with zoning and enabling people to start doing some of these things, because without it, frankly, it's a big deterrent. And so that's, I think, one big trend that you see more and more of. It's again, back to the theme, if the world has too much space, then how are they using the physical space? Well, it has to be something, if they're going to open that store, that location, it enables them to communicate or reach, their end consumer in a different way, and kind of strengthen their project or their company's position.
Yeah, we hear consistently, brand identity, right, is key. And so it's finding that balance between what makes Sugarland what it is, how do you allow retailers to have that brand identity and finding that blend. Tying it back to the tourism side, so how important is it that placemaking and quality of place? How important is that to the retailers? Because I know in Town Square, historically, we did a lot of events just in the plaza here. Your team has taken an effort to move those events out into the streets, trying to pull those people to the storefronts. Do you see, has that been successful? Do you see the retailers are getting more business there? How does that play a role here?
Yeah, so we think of mixed use as if you're truly delivering on like all of the benefits of a mixed use project, then the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, right? Like then it's more than just, you know, if you manage the office by itself or the retail by itself or the hotel by itself. By being able to manage it all together and really try and drive, then again, you're creating that community and then you're creating like a buy-in that becomes more than any of the individual pieces would be able to do on their own. And so, you know, what we're doing with our marketing and our event strategy is designed to do just that, right? It's designed to benefit all of the uses. And so we obviously, you know, it's over 200 events a year that we hold at Sugarland Town Square. And yeah, I think we've been able to draw over 150,000 people to the project and participate in these events in different forms. And they serve different purposes, but if they aren't benefiting the brand of the city, you know, to kind of build and draw awareness, like some of the larger festival type events that we've done outside of the plaza, but in the streetscape, closing down streets like our Oktoberfest event, and we've done a Party Gras event, and we've done one called Kaleidoscope, our design, and we have one upcoming actually that's called Bazaar. Shameless plug moment on May 18th, everybody. And so, but it's one of the things when we talk about tourism, right? Like George and his team have done a great job of like Houston, the branding of it is the culinary capital of the South, right? It is one of our real strengths, and not only like the unique culinary scene, but the diversity of our city, not just Houston, not just Fort Bend, but Sugarland itself. Like that's one of its strengths. So we're really leaning into that. And Bazaar is just that. It is a celebration of kind of the multicultural, value of our city. And it's designed to kind of feature the culinary of each of the kind of unique cultures and celebrate that. And so it's going to be event. And by doing that, we are not only able to draw people here that then drives commerce, right? But it helps create community. People come and then it helps build and on the brand and identity of Sugarland itself. So on some of these events, we've had people come from Galveston. We've had people come cross city from the Woodlands to participate in Oktoberfest, right? And so what does that do? That makes them think about if they come and they have a great time and they think about Sugarland, you know, maybe they hadn't been here in months, years, right? Like the Woodlands or Galveston to Sugarland, it's not a small trip, right? But giving them that opportunity to come and participate in these large scale festivals that go beyond just serving the local community, but help extend the brand of the city and raise awareness for the city in a high, really positive way, and then also drive tourism at the same time.
So right on, right? I mean, at the end of the day, the way we like to say it is, I mean, tourism is quality of life. It's the same thing, right? When we talk about tourism, we're talking about why is it that somebody would visit somewhere for leisure purposes? It's the same reason that your local likes to live there, right? So it likes to have things to do, likes to go to festivals and so forth. Those things that attract visitors are important. And it's the reason you see us more than ever working together with the Greater Houston Partnership, who is trying to bring businesses, right? These days, when the Greater Houston Partnership goes to Japan to try to attract major businesses to relocate to the Greater Houston region, they do a wonderful job at attracting that. But I increasingly see the role of Houston First when we go to these missions is to convince them why they should bring their families to Houston, right? We're keenly aware, as much as we're doing as much branding work as possible, that Houston is still not quite as recognized as those first three cities, right? It's New York, LA, Chicago, then Houston. We need to get to the point where that's the case. When everybody thinks of the first three, the fun part tends to come first, right? And here, the corporate part comes first, the part where it's cost of living and great place to do business. Right. But people also need to come here. And increasingly what we're hearing from the corporate sector is, hey, if a worker that's at an oil and gas company has to make a choice of whether to go to Singapore, London, or Houston, Are they going to pick Houston? Right? The key is to prove and show to them that it's also a great place to live, right? And in that case, in that scenario, it makes sense for you to have these types of events and these types of things to promote in the city, because sometimes the first exposure that a person is going to get to your city is going to be through a business trip or a leisure trip, right? And that exposure is the first time that somebody might say, you know what, I like it here. Maybe I'll come back. Maybe I'll come back and bring my family, right? And then that second time, it's like, I'll come back and bring my family. You know what? I've been looking to get out of California. Maybe I should move. Maybe I should come to Sugar Land, right? Or maybe I should move my business to Sugar Land. We consider tourism the first step in the process of economic development, right? And it's important that you keep those two things put together, right? And I agreed, we have leaned into diversity as our strength, and you're going to see that even more. You're going to start seeing ads that say, in Houston, you're one of us, right? And you're going to see that because the truth is this is, you've heard it said before, this is the most diverse city in the United States. And I think that Sugar Land exemplifies that more than anywhere right now in Houston, right? You've got communities from every part of the world here. You've got Indian, Pakistani, you've got Taiwanese, you've got Vietnamese, all of it coming together in a place where everybody's looking for the same thing, to have a good quality of life, right? Good future for their children, and a safe place to live, right? And I think you've achieved it. I kid around. I come down here 3 times a year, and I always end up at Vinyl and Vino when I come here. And I always stay the night at the Marriott when I come, right? And I love it. I go to Louis, I go to, and that has worked so far. Right. And I think what you have here is, I think that now it's just about expanding it and creating more spaces where you've got locals hanging out at the same time that you're bringing in those people from the outside. You've got great events that are driving that visitation. You've got an office that's promoting those, because those people aren't coming from Galveston by accident, right? They're inviting them here. And that's a crucial part that I think many cities forget as they start to have like an office like Visit Sugar Land, is that those people don't just magically show up. If Houston stopped advertising tomorrow, visitors will stop coming. That's the way it works, right? So you have to keep an eye on both.
We have a lot of diversity here of people. We don't have a lot of diversity of housing product types, right? And we don't have a lot of diversity of retail spaces that are connected. So when I think of the when I think of the developer role, it used to be that people would self-identify as a developer of, I develop multifamily, I develop office, I develop single family housing. What's happened? Our market's shifted significantly. The trend is for people to do mixed use centers, and they're doing it for a number of different reasons, but they're doing it because the sum is greater than the parts, but also that's the way to create significant value. And it's the community value from a standpoint. When we talk about housing diversity, right now, Sugar Land really essentially has 2 product types. We have single family homes and we have some very limited multifamily, right? There's a framework, there's a conversation happening in the real estate development community called missing middle. I've been fortunate to work with Dan Prolick, who coined that term. And really what we used to have from a development framework, we used to have a lot of different housing types. And so we see a little bit of it in Sugar Land. In fact, some of these maps, show the old Brook Street, right, where you have some very small cottages. You had parallel on-street parking. You have Lake Point, which has some different diversity of housing product types. So I would encourage the city and the economic development staff to really think about a diversity of housing product types. I know it's very difficult. I know I'm preaching to the choir, a lot of people in this room. But what that allows to happen is it frees up the larger single family homes for people to move out of. They can then move into different product types that are more specific. So at Indigo, we have cottages that are 800 to 1,200 square feet. What we found when we looked at other markets was that product type spoke to middle-aged single women. They wanted to be in a very specific place. So there's something that speaks to for that category, and it provides security, it provides safety, it provides some sense of community. It's also a thing that can happen where you can do aging in place, right? So you can start in a smaller home, you can move up within a community. You don't have to leave your community because you need to jump up, significant product type. And as we're seeing with housing unaffordability, it's there's a significant increase where it used to be like, oh, you can move up smaller square footage. You can move up some minuscule square footage, right, to get an extra bedroom or whatever. But what's happening in our housing, in our on affordability is that, that jump is significant for people. So you don't really have that gradient. So, I do think that's important. Retail square footages are quite large for most retailers. So there's not the ability for people to kind of start out and try things and move. And so I know that when I think of the mixed use future that we have as a community, we do need to experience some diversity within each of the product categories. We need to experience it with housing. I know when you were talking about hospital and staff, like that's a significant, frustration and concern for not just doctors, but healthcare workers and teachers and everybody else that need to have a place to live within their community.
No, and that's a great point. And I think, everybody here should know at this point, Sugar Land doesn't have a lot of land left, right? So we're at a pivotal point, but we've had great conversations with you and many other stakeholders over these past few years, and we'll continue to have them. And it makes me happy to be able to have the partnerships that we have with you guys to help figure out what is next for Sugar Land, because we have a bright future ahead. There's endless opportunities. It's just finding out what does that look like for us. And so I really want to thank you guys for coming today and having this conversation with us and being candid. And I look forward to continuing to work. I call you, especially you two, I call y'all regularly. So, but with that, I want to open up for questions. I want to make sure we get some time for that. So if anybody in the board, yes.
Talk to me about, in each respective category, the workforce of the future. We talked a little bit about the fact that the younger workforce right now has gotten some of their time back by working at home. And I'm in the consulting engineering business. We certainly see that. But look out 10 years and tell me what that workforce looks like, because that drives each one of your businesses. And it'll so drive our community.
I mean, I agree with what's been said today. I think the workforce of the future wants to be able to have the flexibility to work and play in the same place. That's been difficult, right? I think we're all struggling with that on some level, including at our company. But I think that it's impossible to think that we're going to be able to go back to a model where we're commuting 30 miles to go to a job constantly. And frankly, I don't think that our city will be able to sustain that, right? For the sake of maintaining roads where we don't have to travel 2 hours to go to work every day, you're going to have to come up with other models that keep employees in place. I also feel that just from my sector in particular, this is hospitality is a great area to start with workers that are looking to get into the workforce, right? I mean, the University of Houston has arguably one of the top 3 in the Hilton School of Global Management programs. You've got a pool of candidates, young people that are coming out that are ready to start off, and that's something that our industry needs, right? And there's a lot of youth there that wants to move into it. As you develop as a destination, you're going to need more seasoned professionals and so forth. But those seasoned professionals increasingly are thinking like the younger people. Right. I kid around. It's not just the young people that want to work at home. Right. I want to work at home too. Right. And not because I don't want to work, because that's also a commonly held belief. Right. Like it's because it generally is. I have different challenges. Right. I have a 10-year-old and, my wife works too. And I like the flexibility of being able. I just think it's a more realistic approach to work life. What we have to do is adjust our attitudes about what work looks like. That's it.
I was going to say, workforce of the future in healthcare is dynamically different. So for a hospital setting, I would say fast forward 10, 15, 20 years, the hospital setting must exist, but it's going to be incredibly complex care where you are going for invasive treatments that can only be done in that setting. You're talking gamma radiation, you're talking invasive surgery, you're talking high-priced robots that can only be done. But when you talk about the workforce of the future, we're already effectively using the workforce of the future right now. We have doctors in New York covering some of our ICUs because they can provide that level of care through virtual visits in real time. So that's one example. Virtual nurses don't want to be in a hospital setting. They want to be able to work in a hospital setting as well as working virtual. Radiologists, for example. people think radiologists are in hospital. Many of your radiologists are likely in a foreign time zone or in a foreign country on vacation, and they're working overnight. In fact, I know Houston Methodist considered how to do virtual programs where we're in Australia. So our workforce is in Australia, where it's day there and night here. And so therefore you can blend that team and go, hey, they're very happy there in Australia. They rotate for a year, they come back, and it's great work-life balance. Some of the other things, though, have to get acceptance from the public. I'm not sure how many of you heard about ICU at home. Imagine what that looks like, right? You're getting ICU care at home. Home health providers are coming to see you. Nurses are coming to see you. But that's a dramatic shift, which will go to what Clayton talked about. How does that mixed type of environment accommodate an aging population as well as a young population? Because the needs are going to be different. And as much as I talk about wellness, at some point, we're all going to need healthcare. The question is who's going to provide it? Where are they going to provide it from? And how far do you have to travel? And then the other part that will factor into all of this, how do we get paid for this to effectively provide the highest level of care? And I think that's important to us because we want to provide the highest level of care with the best talent. And you get to stay at home close to everything else that's already here. And I think that's important for us.
I think the workforce of the future might not always recognize it, but they actually need to be in the office a little bit more from a productivity standpoint. They value the flexibility, they value the impacts on lifestyle, but despite after years now of seeing, with virtual, the ability to still be productive, right? An initial spike in productivity, it's now started to kind of really wane and trail off. And I think for the younger workforce and the workforce of the future, without it, they lose the ability for the mentorship and the training and the in-person, gaining of skills and learning and teaching moments that it's just a lot harder to do virtually. And so I think that there's more acceptance and recognition of that with time, but also, office and places that are trying to attract them need to have better tools to make it, want them to be there. Right. And so with that, I think that we can get back to what is, been a more normal type of kind of professional type of environment, but it all needs to evolve.
I read a New York Times article about Japan and the decline of the population in Japan, and it was really saying like, where's the US headed, right? We're headed to a population decline, and the interesting thing to me about it was they talked about the places that were in demand became much more in demand, and the places that were not in demand had a significant decline. And so I feel like I feel like our job as developers is to create demand, to create value, but also to create demand. And I think what we'll see is the places that are in demand are going to be significantly more in demand. Now, I think that the shift, the nuance there will be that people that need to go into the office, or it's really a drive to quality in a sense. So not only will the place have to have some qualities that are desirable, but I think there'll be individual qualities within the framework. So I think the form of a mixed use center changes. I think we start to see smaller places. I think you start to see some individualization of it. And then I think that, when you're having conversations with a workforce, I was in an architect's office the other day, and there were 50 desks and maybe 4 people there. And it's like, we've all had that experience. That really is a challenge. Like the design framework of that place needs to change, and the reasons why people are there need to change. So I think we're going to see a shift to quality, a shift to some specific uses, but I think the form actually gets generalized, if that makes sense.
One comment I did want to add. So when I hear the form changing, when the shift is going out into the community for healthcare environments, what do we do with all these buildings that are too expensive? And this is where I know when you look at the sheer workforce and the number of healthcare providers we have, there's been questions, can we repurpose it? Do you make it dorms? You go from clinic rooms to dorms. How do you provide affordable housing to the workforce? And the workforce of the future is still required to be a workforce on that premise. But how do you make better use of that versus building more just for the sake of building?
Yeah, the adaptive reuse, right? Because like the functional and physical obsolescence of historic buildings and structures is,
Right.
you know, and either from a pure functional standpoint or like a social standpoint, right? Like it's just not relevant anymore. And so there's going to need to be repurposed. And I 100% agree with you is there's going to be the stuff that works really well that is going to continue to draw like even more demand than it would have historically. And then stuff that kind of drifts off into that obsolescence. And it's that stuff that you need to think through what's the future and what's its future purpose. Because in its current form, in a world, again, with too much space, it's not needed, you know?
And then
Question.
Yeah, it's a-
So when you talk about repurposing buildings, you know, we derive the majority of our revenue for the city. So we're $360 million budget approximately. And if you look at our general fund, which is a little over 100, call it 110 million, you know, we get sales and use tax, but a lot of that's ad valorem tax. And if you look at the way we fund debt, that's all ad valorem tax. So if you repurpose a building and our assessed value shrinks, guess what? The tax rate goes up. And so, you know, looking out, you know, long term, I'm not gonna have to worry about it because I won't be mayor, but somebody else is gonna have to worry about it. It certainly keeps me up at night thinking about as spaces now get repurposed, how do those values change? Certainly in finance, and that's my background too, is finance. Certainly in finance, you know, we see the foreclosures, we see people, you know, having to repurpose buildings with a lesser value because it's a lesser rent for whatever that next value is. It's not Class A office space, it may be Class C or D, it may be industrial. And anybody speak to where they see that going?
I mean, I can speak to it being a real issue. I don't know the answer. But your point is spot on, right? It is, look, we're in a world where not only because of all the, you know, forces that we've been talking about, the pandemic and whatnot, but then, you know, obviously just a big shift in interest rates that's repricing everything, right? And so there's no way around it. Values have fallen, right? And then within that, some things have held their value and then some have really gotten crushed. And for, you know, cities, for jurisdictions that generate a lot of their revenues through those tax bases, it's going to be a challenge, to be honest. You know, and I don't have the answer. But it's also, you know, some of those things that do need to be repurposed need to be able to figure out ways to deal with, you know, they're going to be even less viable if they have less of a, you know, kind of a tenant demand and then a high cost burden structure, right? Like it will just further erode and kind of become self-reinforcing, but it's a fascinating challenge, I think, ahead.
This is kind of a follow-up on the mayor's point, and, you know, I'm sitting here thinking that you've got all these great ideas or things you're ready to do, and as a council, we're ready to do stuff. We're thinking from our perspective, and by the way, 65-year-olds don't use canes and walkers. I'm not 65, I know that, so we think that, but so my question to you is, if we're building for the future, where is that future? How are you engaging them to look at how we build this city? Because we have ideas, but that would incorporate our way of living. So if we're building for someone else, the next generation, how are you incorporating those thoughts and those ideas? Where do you find those answers?
What I've seen other cities do well is you have to create a master plan. You have to get all of these voices into a room and then actively create a plan for it. Like you have to listen to the people. You have to, you're going to have to make some tough decisions. There's going to have to be, you know, there's limited space here, which I've seen several times as I've gone through this process. So you have to be very careful, but I think you can't do it just by it's going to have to be, and it's going to have to be a 10-year master plan, something that really encompasses all of it, in my opinion, and get these voices down and make some. There's going to be some tough decisions without fail.
actually, just to echo George's comment, we also do master planning, I think, to account for it. When you're navigating large complex spaces, how do you make it easy for the consumer and the families to just stay where they need to be without having to transverse from a half mile away walk all the way just to actually get from point A to point B. So if we can have a master plan that actually takes into account the needs of that specialty and then keep them there and then get them home, easy to navigate, that works. And right now, we get a lot of the feedback from what we call a patient family advisory committee. We invite patients to join the committee, we invite their families to join the committee, and they give us lots of feedback. And some of their feedback goes from, please have, there's one group that says have carpets in front of the door because then that way you can minimize the trip risk. So everyone can clean their shoes when it's wet. Then there's the other half that says it's a trip hazard. And you stay there and you go, how do you do that? And then recent recommendation, but this is always a recommendation. On campuses as large as ours or other large campuses, do you get bicycles? Do you get golf carts? Do you get scooters? And then meanwhile, I'm thinking, someone's going to get hurt, family's going to slip and slide. Good emergency room visit, so that will actually work out. But these are those things that you get feedback and comments from patient and families, so we can design it appropriately. And then we have to stay true to what they want, because they're the ones that represent all the visitors that we get.
I slight, not counterpoint, but a slight different angle. I think planning is important, but I think one of the other things that the city's done a great job of is creating some new zoning that enables more flexibility. And because if things are overly prescriptive, then that can exacerbate the issue of there's only one thing that can work here, right? And so flexibility, like I think the reality is the market is more fluid than it's ever been, and the pace of change is accelerating, right? And so despite efforts on whatever 10-year master plan we might be able to put in place right now, if it is overly prescriptive and doesn't enable the market to evolve around it, then we could just be in a situation where we're in a, 5-7 years later where we have something that doesn't work, right? And so I think that what the city has done a great job of with some of the initiatives related to kind of enabling some more mixed use and more flexibility in its zoning is really important, because it enables a little bit more wiggle room for market forces to be able to kind of take shape in ways that I think are more necessary today than maybe they've ever been.
Let's talk about schools, right? So we've got some amazing schools in Fort Bend, and one of the fears around changes is like, especially multifamily, let's take. Well, we don't want to put multifamily, people will say it or they won't say it, but I'll say it. We don't want to put multifamily in because that's going to overburden our schools. And we talk about overburden, we talk about density, and we talk about overburdening and talk about these things. There is a way, I feel like, and I think that's accurate based on statistics and sort of data, to support a density of housing that doesn't overburden schools. So, there's sophisticated real estate prognosticators that are out there. And, I wouldn't call myself one of those people, but there's ways to accomplish that. So when we're talking about retail spaces and supporting sort of lifestyle choices and what needs to happen, there are ways to accomplish those things that aren't, that don't sort of, that a little bit challenge the status quo, but also like don't say we have to have this many parking spaces for this thing, right? And so that's a challenge to density. That we can build multifamily that isn't going to overburden the schools. We can tell the type of people that move into this type of unit that aren't going to, end up in our high schools. And we can look at we could talk to PASA about our consulting group that does Fort Bend schools and really get into the weeds on it. And I think that there's an easy framework to just say like, oh no, we can't do this for these reasons. There's another sort of layer that sits below that says like, we absolutely need to do these things. And here's how we do it in a way that supports community, that supports the current residents, that sort of has this, diversity of housing types and people that need to be here. So when I think of what I want in Sugar Land is I want a diversity of experiences. I want people to be able to move here. I want the next generation to be able to afford to buy here. And I think that those are some real, challenges that we're all very aware of that's confronting us right now. It's also happening in other places, when we look at what Sugar Land can be on a relative basis to other cities, like we were talking about Frisco as a sort of a tourism example that's sort of different, right? And we can look at what Frisco has or doesn't have. We can look at what Sugar Land has or doesn't have. There's going to have to be some choices around those things. But I feel like there's this, it's such a rich, like, it's an amazing place to live. I think we all feel that way. It's like, it feels like there's a couple of small shifts, and I have some opinions about those, that we could do that really help some of the experience, some of the goals that we're trying to accomplish. And so I think that, I'm encouraged by the council and the corporation board here's, even having a panel like this. And I know you've done a tremendous amount of work already on these types of things. And so, I wanted to thank you for including us.
I think community engagement is a big thing, though. I mean, our council does want to hear from our residents and our stakeholders. And at the end of the day, though, like, we have an audience that engages with the government entity. You guys have your own audiences. Like, in a perfect world, how do we combine forces to get feedback from all of our audiences? Because we do need to understand the whole picture. And that's something that we talk about in our department and citywide all the time. And so look forward to my request coming of how we can better get that feedback. There's my plug for the day. One more question, and then we have one more thing to get to. Yes, sir.
Along those. Feedback on what should we be thinking about making.
From a tourism perspective, I think that the decisions need to be made on perhaps convention center, conference center, and so forth, right? I mean, if you're going to use tourism as a and this is, I suppose, a question I would have back to you, but if the goal is, you can't think of tourism as just hotel occupancy tax generation, right? Because hotel occupancy tax generation is limited in the way you can use it, right? And so you have to think about it also sales tax and state tax generation, right? So as you consider the areas that are under development, in my mind, you have to consider, okay, is it that we're going to build a specific district where there's going to be a conference center, convention center, something of the sort that is supported by a hotel infrastructure and a mixed use facility that maybe isn't for your locals, right? Maybe that area, whatever it becomes, wherever you put that, it's just a revenue generator for you, right? And that's the way we think of it, right? That it's a revenue generator, again, from these folks that are coming from outside of the city, and then that are generating economic impact, but also putting dollars in your coffers, right? And maybe that's not in the same place. I mean, you could do that with an attraction. I think a great example of that, you brought it up, but with Frisco, right? Frisco decides that they want a Universal Studios. Well, that's great. I'm guessing the locals aren't going to like it, right? I'm guessing they're not going to want 100,000 cars in their neighborhoods, right? And they're going to have to build an incredible amount of infrastructure. But then again, look what happened in Waco, right? Joanna Gaines, and you build an amazing structure out of a historic building, which, like, I'm pretty sure you guys have, right? And they turn that into something that everybody wants to see, right? A place, a destination, a must destination now, just by getting a little television show put together, right? Which is doable. That's doable, right? You got all kinds of influencers in this world now that can help make those things happen, right? That's another direction you can head with it. But it doesn't all have to be in the same place. I think that these can be two separate conversations. I encourage you to think about this as revenue generation from outside the city, right? And that may mean it has to be something separate.
I was going to say, I'm sure the council has thought about it, and you persevere over how best to address traffic, parking, because when you look at it, for every time we think of what we're building, the second question goes, how do we accommodate all the people that are going to be driving there? Like, we're looking at building what we call MOB5, Medical Office Building 5. It requires a parking garage for 700 spaces to be built with it. So then we have to factor that cost. You have a parking garage that big, how much traffic is that going to cause? And you look at Town Square, look at all the events. They're great events. But how long does it take you to get there? How difficult is it to park? How difficult is it to navigate? You're happy when you're there, but then you're also thinking at any event, how difficult is it going to be for me to go there? And sometimes it's just easier to skip that event or take Uber or Lyft, so you don't have to worry about that. But I know that this council is already thinking about how best to navigate traffic and parking challenges.
I would just push more into identity, in a way. Like, when I think of Sugar Land, I sort of, it doesn't have the same context that other cities have. And I think part of that's, limit, I don't know. Like, I think that there could be another great mixed use center. I think there can sort of be a beating heart, a district, I think there's lots of things that can really accomplish some of these things. I think parts becoming much more dense, I think would obviously be a critical factor. I think it helps taxes. It helps, grab some of your retail and some interesting things. So that's generally what I think of.
Awesome. So we're gonna end there. We have one more item to go through, but the panelists will be here afterwards. If you want to have any more. No, we don't. Just kidding. We still have to end for city council though. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.